Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
I am Finale Norton. It is Friday, October the 4th, and welcome to the Friday Power Lunch. We're going to have a fantastic show today. One of the things that we always focus on is how do we have these conversations? And really, the way that our strategy is at this moment is having it through direct conversations. You can chat with a friend, you can talk to a family member, a neighbor, someone on the telephone. But when you talk and have these few words, even in the grocery store, it can really start a conversation and it can really help change people's mind. It's low-tech strategies that really work. And then also you can do it with a billboard or a handwritten postcard. All of these things matter. As Robbin likes to say, is that little hello in the mailbox when you get a postcard. So I want to remind you that these are fantastic things, and we're going to talk to you today about how you can do them. So there's a lot of noise, and you sort of think about it. How do you get through? Well, today we have fantastic guests. Elizabeth Chur has a fantastic book. It's The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers. How to Save Democracy, One Conversation at a Time. And Antonia Scatton, Reframing America. And you can also get her Substack, and that information will also be in the chat. So today, we're going to do something special. We're going to do our Do Something Challenge first. And it's going to be challenge number 6. But before I do that, I want to remind you of the other challenges. The first one was to find a partner. The second one was to call 3 people and get them to commit to voting early. The third one was making some noise. The fourth one was voting on day 1 and amplifying. And then the 5th one last week was to get out of your comfort zone and to do something that you felt a little uncomfortable about. We wanted you to do that. And today we have a really special one. It is on billboards. And so you're thinking, well, billboards. What about billboards? Well, I don't know if Lindley's here yet, but if she isn't, while I'm waiting for her, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this weekend because Carrie would be really mad if I didn't do that. Oh, wonderful. So Lindley, I'm going to tell them about this weekend first. So this weekend is the, this weekend is the weekend of action in Virginia Beach. I get a little bit of brain fart every now and then, is the weekend of action in Virginia Beach. So if you're there today on Friday, there's going to be a little bit of a chill and chat where you can go out and you can write some postcards and we'll give you all the information. Thank you so much. That's the meetup today, the chat and chill at the ocean front. And then later is going to be canvassing on Saturday with Missy Cotter-Smazel. It's going to be fantastic. You guys know those are where those conversations actually happen. And then on Sunday, it's going to be Souls to the Polls. And they even have the link that you can go here, covacoalition.org, to get all of the information. Thank you so much for that, Robbin. But now we have Lindley, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is billboards. So Lindley, you know how much I love billboards. And so I'm going to tell them a little bit about what we've done. You can't have you can't say I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. This is an election where it's and. And when you can't get to people at the door or you can't get to them on the phone, there's all these outside ways to get to them. And billboards are one of those ways. And so, Robbin, can you stick up some billboards for us before I bring Lindley in to tell everybody how she's going to help us do the billboards? And I'll just use an example on the Eastern Shore where we're a small rural community, but we have the Friends of the Democrats, we have the Democratic committees, and they have all worked together to collect funds to do billboards with the help of Rural Ground Game. And though we're a small community of about 44,000 people, we had 6 billboards coming up on Route 13 in our areas. And that's what these billboards look like. And I think they are fabulous. So you guys can all applaud on the side because they are fantastic. So today, what we want to do is we want to ask all of you to help us do billboards in rural communities across Virginia. And what that can look like is, $2,000, I think would do a great billboard. Think about, the $5 that you might spend for a cup of coffee or the $10 that you might spend, getting something else done, or maybe you get your nails done or a pedicure. Think about those funds today going towards a billboard for us. And so I'm going to ask Lindley if she'll just talk a little bit about the billboards and talk a little bit about how everybody can contribute today to do a billboard. And won't that feel great as your challenge, your do something challenges, that we get the Friday Power Lunch crew to do a billboard?
Yeah, thank you, Finale. We had an absolutely wonderful time out on the Eastern Shore very recently and had already distributed some 4-foot by 8-foot barn signs. You saw an example there because they love those so much that they put one of the barn sign designs up on a billboard. And like Finale said, there's 6 of those. We have really good data from the Department of Transportation about how many people see these billboards every single week. So we currently have billboards up and down the Shenandoah Valley, out in far southwest, out on the Eastern Shore. We would love to put some in Gloria Witt's district, some in Leslie Mehta's district. We've got newspaper ads drafted, more billboards drafted, ready to go. Any contributions you can make today, and I'll put that direct link in the chat, although I'm pretty sure Robbin covered it like she always does. All of those funds will go directly into just getting more of those out the door. We do need to sign contracts for those in the next 4 to 5 days. So timing is really, really key. And this makes sure that rural voters are seeing our message and making sure that they know what we're asking them to do between now and November 5th and on election day itself.
So, Lindley, you're going to help us keep track of how well we're doing in terms of collecting donations today for our billboard, right?
That is right. The link that Robbin is sharing is one made especially for this group. So we can keep you posted on how much you've raised and what we're able to do with those funds.
And one of the other points is a lot of you on the Zoom today write postcards. And when you write the postcards, you fund those postcards yourself with your stamps. So I'm not saying not to write postcards, but I'm saying that you could use those funds today to help us fund a billboard. And I think that'd be pretty exciting. The other thing is when we work with Rural Ground Game, they really listen intently to the kind of community that we have, who we think our voters are, and what kind of messages we think resonate with them. So it's just pretty awesome to work with Rural Ground Game to get things done. And we feel like they really represent our community and they really represent the voters that we want to reach out to. So thank you, Lindley.
I will share our drafts page with you all so you can see the creative process and how local Democrats are active participants in creating these ads. So thank you all so much.
All right, fantastic. So we're going to keep on moving along with the show today, and we're going to start with Elizabeth Chur. She is the author of The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers: How to Save Democracy, One Conversation at a Time. And really, Elizabeth, I am so excited to have you with us today. You did training for us maybe a year or so ago, you and the 34%, which I thought was pretty phenomenal. And I will go ahead and boast and tell people that before we even talked to you, I'd already had the book.
I'm so honored.
So Elizabeth, I'm going to let you just get started a little bit with what your thinking was about doing this book. And then I've got a lot of things that I want to ask and talk to you about.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And it's just such an honor to be with all of you. I was a very occasional phone banker before 2016. And after the results of those elections came in, I realized I really need to step it up. So I have basically, I started with postcards, went on to phone banking, then went on to canvassing, and I really fell in love with it. And so much so that I've now I've talked to more than 1,000 voters, and I've trained over 2,500 people nationally about how to improve our conversations with voters, one conversation at a time. And I started to do some writing about the best things that I've learned from that experience. And I realized that it was more than could fit in an essay. So I really wanted to write a book, and it just came out last month. So I'm really excited that.
So here's what I would tell everyone if they haven't gotten this book, and I know that you put the information in the chat. You should get the book. I see it as a workbook. And so when I got the book and started to go through it, I just went through your table of contents, each chapter, and I'd go, oh, I want to do this one first. And oh, I want to do that one first, because it was just so powerful in terms of the things that we think about every day. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, is that people are often afraid when you think about doing some of the activities when you were thinking about talking to strangers. So, talk a little bit about this whole notion of talking to strangers and why you think that that's such a challenge for people.
Well, I'll just say I'm an introvert, so I'm naturally a little bit shy, but I'm a friendly introvert. And once I got over the hump of thinking, oh my goodness, I have to approach complete strangers either on the phone or in person to talk about one of these charged issues, I realized that there are so many great people across this country. And a lot of people really want the same things. You know, they want better schools for their kids. They want to be able to afford healthcare. They want affordable housing. They want to be drinking clean water, breathing clean air. And, that there's so much that unites us, but that there are a lot of forces at play right now that are trying to make us afraid to talk with one another. But really, these one-on-one conversations are really like the oldest form of human communication that we have. And I think that they can be truly transformative. Both in restoring some of the ties that bind us together as a country, and also to try to move our country in a positive direction for the upcoming elections.
So here's one of the things that I loved. There's a chapter in there, and it's the 80-20 rule. And I know that people always are very concerned about, oh, geez, I don't know what I'm going to say. I can't remember all the issues. But why don't you talk a little bit about the 80-20 rule that I think will put a lot of people at ease?
Absolutely. So, yeah, like you said, a lot of people feel like they have to be experts in the policy and every single vote that a candidate has ever taken in their lives. And really, what I found is that 80% them, 20% me seems to be a good formula. People in general love to talk about themselves. And it's actually pretty rare to find someone that is really listening attentively and isn't just trying to grab the mic back, so to speak. And I think being able to center the voter in that conversation, that they're the star of their show, how they're going to vote, what's important to them. I can be like their backup singer. I can ask questions. I can kind of highlight certain things that I think are important or might be in alignment with the candidate or cause that I am talking to them about. But really, they are the protagonist. And I think people feel very honored. They feel seen and heard. And I can't tell you how rare that is and how powerful that can be.
So it does take the stress off of you because you don't really have to say, well, geez, because it's really about the authentic you when you're at the door. And so there are things that you're going to be passionate about, that you'll care about, but that's not why you're at the door.
Exactly. I feel like obviously I care about these things. Otherwise, I wouldn't be going way out of my comfort zone. But I need to put those things on the back burner for the moment, and also process some of the things that might come up, with my friends or colleagues later on. But in that conversation, I'm really there. In my best moments, I aspire to bring non-judgmental curiosity. I ask a lot of open-ended questions that can't be answered with a yes or no. And I try to bring empathy and really presume goodwill in that person, unless proven otherwise, but really try to come in with the assumption that they're a good person, they're trying their best. And even if we may disagree on certain points, to try to find out more about why they feel that way, what is underneath that initial position they might have, and sometimes getting to understand more about the why actually helps me see that there are points of commonality or connection, and those are the things that I can foster as I continue that conversation.
So how does that work with the dreaded the Trumper, when you get to a door and you find out that you're at the door of a Trumper?
Well, I mean, I'll just say first, because this is something that people, of course, is their worst fear. If someone is hostile or threatening, I end that conversation immediately. There's nothing worth risking my safety or my life over. That being said, I feel like a lot of people that have voted for Trump are actually quite cordial and polite. And obviously, we disagree on who we are voting for at that level. Sometimes I might engage them to ask them what they like about him. And sometimes they say, well, I don't like the things he says, but my investments did better under him. So it really it depends on the person. But I have to say, I'm often canvassing on behalf of congressional candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they are absolutely committed to voting for Trump, I might say, oh, it sounds like, you really, you're really strong on that position. I'm just kind of curious, what, if anything, have you heard about, X candidate, candidate so-and-so for Congress, or for Senate? Because, a lot of people are split ticket voters. A lot of people are very proud of the fact they're like, oh, I don't vote a party line. I go by the individual. And so I feel like there are ways that we can kind of peel off maybe some sort of down ballot votes if there is some wiggle room around there. And that, I think, is an opportunity that I want to take advantage of if I'm in a conversation with them.
So, one thing that I loved when I was going through the book and I was going canvassing, I felt like that I had a renewed sense of positivity. And part of that came from when I was reading the book, you talked about two things. And one of them was about how you approach people and how people have approached you and how you think about it. And you said that someone called you up to volunteer. And you talked a little bit about what that conversation was like, and then how you sort of think about that when you are talking to people or asking people to volunteer. Can you chat about that a minute?
Sure. So it's funny, a lot of the techniques that work well with voters, I think, also work well with volunteers. And I I got a call a few years ago from someone, and they said, I'm calling from such and such organization, and can we get you to phone bank? And I said, well, I'm actually teaching I've several workshops for your organization, so I'm really busy with that, but I might be able to do it in a few months. And instead of her saying, oh, that's really interesting, or thank you so much, she just said, okay, I'll just mark you down and I'll call you back in the fall. And it felt very transactional. Like she had zero curiosity and basically no appreciation for the work that I was already doing for her group. And, although she was very polite, I just felt like I was just another box to check.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when we're talking to voters, I think that vibe can come across that they're just, we just want to check some boxes, can we count on your vote? Like that's the second sentence out of our mouths. And I feel like people can be a little put off by that, whereas if we kind of, yes, we want to get the answer to those questions about what's your level of support, can we count on your vote, or can you sign up? But really to engage in a more back and forth human conversation, it would have been great if she said, oh, tell me more about those workshops. Oh, that sounds so interesting. I'm really glad that you're helping us get better at reaching out to people who say I rarely or never vote. Thank you so much. So to the gratitude, the curiosity, that would have made me a lot more enthusiastic about re-upping for volunteering with her group. And I think with voters, the same approach holds true, that if we bring that curiosity and that appreciation for, if they voted in the past, or they're considering it, just whatever kind of connection I can make can really go a long way.
So one of the things that I read in here that I thought was really important is when you were talking about, you don't complain. There's no complaining in this book whatsoever. Everything that you do, you think about finding a solution for. Now I don't want people to be afraid when you talk about the languages that you studied and learned, but there's a part in here where you talk about you were canvassing and people spoke a language that you didn't speak, and you thought about, how am I going to fix that for the next time? Can you please tell us what you decided to do?
Well, there's a couple of things. I was phone banking in 2016 to voters in Nevada, and some of them didn't speak English, and I did not speak Spanish. And so after the results of that election came in, I said, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do, but I know I can start by learning Spanish. So I've been taking Spanish for 7.5 years now, and I have been able to use Spanish at the doorsteps of hundreds of voters now. And I actually teamed up with my Spanish teacher and have trained almost 200 people, almost 200 volunteers nationally on election Spanish, so a Spanish for Activists workshop. And we not only teach about the basics of how do you start a conversation, how do you talk about the issues, but also I think some of those intangibles, which are also very important, both in English and in Spanish, things, it's called back channeling. So indicators that you're listening. Oh, wow, tell me more. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That sounds really hard. And then the magic phrase is, tell me more about that. And in Spanish, it's cuénteme más sobre eso, tell me more about that. That is just like the key that can open up so much. And I think people really respond well because it indicates that I am really listening, and I do want to hear the details of their lives and what's important to them.
So tell us about your phone channel, your back channel that you use for a language that you don't have, but you have friends that you have created or people that you know who you can call on to help you through a conversation.
Absolutely. So, at sometimes I am, I did learn Spanish, but I haven't learned every language yet. But as I connect with people in my friend circle and also actually voters sometimes, if they're really enthusiastic, I will ask for if they would be willing to sort of be available to help me translate. I have some friends who speak Tagalog, and they said, they can't go canvas, but they're happy to help out. So I have their number programmed into my phone, with their name and the language, because if I'm suddenly at the doorstep and I can't remember their last name, but I remember which language they speak, so I have kind of tried to curate a handful of people that speak other languages, just so I have that literally in my back pocket, because you never know when someone, this might be the one vote that decides the election. And if we have the language competency, and maybe I don't have it personally, but I know people who do, I mean, that's just an example of how we can leverage the power of our collective talents to be able to connect with voters.
So for those who are just joining, I'm talking to Elizabeth Chur. She's the author of The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers. I won't ask you to read it, but because we're moving along in time, but I do want you to tell the story. It's sort of like you've been phone banking and you've been talking to folks, and sometimes it's really hard. And there's this one lady that you're talking to. Tell us what happened with that conversation because you didn't give up.
Yeah, so this was actually for the Senate runoffs in Georgia in December 2020. And I called her, and she said she hadn't even voted in the presidential election a few weeks back, and she had no idea that there was another election coming up. And, she was just so overwhelmed with caring for her mom, who had some mental and physical disabilities. And she said she couldn't even think about politics. So I listened to her for about 20 minutes because she really seemed to want to talk, and she was so upset about all these things that were happening. And, part of me is thinking, I really have so many other calls to make, and am I wasting my time? But she really wanted to talk. And, and so I just tried to stay engaged with her. And I was listening to all the things that she was telling me. And then finally, about after 20 minutes, she said, so you're calling from the Democrats? I'm like, yes. And she said, what is this about? And I told her about the election, and she said she indicated that she leaned towards the Democrats as well, but she hadn't voted for years because she's so busy, and she's just so sick of the politics. But I because I had been listening to her for 20 minutes, I was telling her why I was calling, why this Senate election was so important, and that I personally was thrilled that Biden had been elected, but if we couldn't take the Senate, he'd be blocked at every turn, and that the elections the next week could determine whether he would be able to move forward with his legislative agenda or not. And, and I listed off things. She had, run out of unemployment. She was struggling with the bills, medications were really high. So I was listening and addressing to all the things that she said, and something clicked for her. And she said, that's it. I'm going to vote next week, and I'm going to make sure my whole family votes too. And I was like, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And I, because we're also supposed to vote triple, right? And I said, well, could you reach out to 3 other people and make sure they vote? And she's like, yeah, I'll make sure my husband's 100 coworkers, most of them didn't vote in November either, but I'll make sure that they get out and vote, and I'll organize a cookout, and I'll make sure they're come. And she was Latino, and she said, I will, we're Hispanic, we get things done. I'll say, go vote and then come to the cookout. And it was so amazing that we went in this conversation from I'm not voting to yes, I'll vote, and make sure my family votes. And I also will, get people in my community to vote. And just, as I always try to do a little extra follow-up. One of my things is like being concierge, phone banker, canvasser, and how to get people just to the next level. So I said, would it be okay for me to just text you or reach out in a week to check in, make sure if you have any questions, she said, sure. And so I texted her, a few days later, and I reminded her where to go vote early. And she wrote back, she said, thank you so much for calling. God works in mysterious ways. If I had a loudspeaker, I would drive around town telling everybody about the election. So this is what is possible in a single conversation. I mean, that was an exceptional conversation, but I'm just saying that, this is the power of one-to-one conversations.
It really is powerful. Elizabeth Chur, the author of Talking with Strangers, you're going to stay with us in the after chat. And what the surprise is that Elizabeth is even going to be willing to take questions from you guys, and we'll role play some of the challenges that you might have. How cool is that? So Elizabeth, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the after chat.
Thank you, Finale.
You're welcome. So now we're going to have Carrie come up, and we're going to do a little bit of chatting. So Carrie, come on up.
Thanks for having me. So I am camped out. Here I am. I'm camped out in the offices of the VBEA, which is, of course, one of Virginia's largest teachers unions, I know. And we are getting super excited. This place is buzzing because we are hosting one of the events for the October weekend of action here at the VBEA. So tonight, as we mentioned before, we got a little mix and mingle mixer at the oceanfront just to welcome everyone who's coming in from out of town. There is still time. I hear the traffic at the tunnel is not that bad right now. Vance was here yesterday and clogged everything up, and everyone was very grumpy about it. But today I'm told everything's looking pretty good. So all my friends, there's still time to meet us at 7:00 for the mixer. And then tomorrow morning, really the main event is we are hosting a very large canvas rally here, along with several other grassroots organizations, the Virginia Beach EMS and firefighters, VBEA, as I mentioned, Virginia Grassroots, COVA Coalition, Go CD2, and Moms Demand Action. So we're all coming together to do all this down here. We've actually picked up some national attention. We just got word about an ago that Harris Walls is picking up our event. So we're very excited about that. We, of course, are going to flip CD2. That is our biggest goal.
Flip CD2.
And so that's kind of why everyone is really paying attention to this area right now. And then the other reason is because we're going to be supporting these down ballot school board races. Friends, they are banning books. It's already happening. They are banning books at Virginia Beach. They have a trans ban in the schools. It's pretty ugly. So we've been working really hard on these Virginia Beach school board races, and for canvassers to come out of town and carry lit for a school board member is incredible. So we are really expecting an amazing event. And then we are on Sunday, there's a big Souls to the Polls effort with NAACP. They're going to be busing voters to the polls from 2 to 4. We are going to we've already postcarded this area in Chesapeake. And now we're going to follow up with a lit drop. And so for all of my Leaflet Every Door fans out there, that's exactly what we're doing Sunday morning. We are leafleting every door. We are not using anyone's list. This is guerrilla style activism at its finest. We are leafleting every single door. So, and then in the afternoon, we've got the Equality Bus coming to visit the early voting site in Chesapeake. Should be a lot of fun. The Virginia Ratify ERA team will be out there with their purple bus. And it's going to be sort of the grand finale of the weekend of action. We've been working really hard on this event for months. We have our attendance on Mobilize is looking really, really good. So, but really, there is still time for anyone to get in the car and come on down. I know Stair has booked some hotel rooms at the DoubleTree, so that's kind of where everyone's staying. I'm sure you have friends in southeastern Virginia down here you can bunk up with. But really, it's not too late. I hope we've inspired you to come down and help us flip CD2.
So yes,
That's what it's
Carrie,
about.
you're very inspirational. And so I'm going to ask you this question. So Katherine, Network Nova is there. Katherine is on her way driving. That's why she's not here. And we get to do this. So that's pretty cool. Right? Yeah, I know, right? And
When the
so,
cat's away.
and we already said Stair, who's already driven down. We love the dropping leaflets because I can't say leafleting. So dropping leaflets is going to be really, really fun. Stair and I did that day before yesterday, and it's really fun. And you end up talking to people that you wouldn't have talked to. And we've got two people to go back to register to vote that we wouldn't have talked to. So when you drop the leaflet, it's not your intention always to talk to people, but if they're there, you get to talk to them. So that's pretty awesome. So tell me, what time does the canvassing start on Saturday morning?
So Saturday morning, tomorrow morning, we're meeting here at 9:30. And we have some speakers that are going to kick us off, and then the canvassing begins at 10. But don't worry, my non-canvasser friends, like Elizabeth used to be. We also have some volunteer opportunities here. We're going to be postcarding and text banking back at the VBEA office for all of our folks who are a little shy and aren't really happy about canvassing. And you're trying to get there, but we're also trying to communicate to everyone that all of our volunteer work is valid. If you're not okay with canvassing, we are okay. We value your gifts no matter where you're going to give them. So we're happy to have volunteers show up at 9:30 as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think people should really also know is that we need drivers. Drivers make life so easy because they can sort of follow along with you as you jump in and out of the car. If there's a bad dog, you can jump in the car really fast. So there's just all these really, really great things that you can do, and driving is really, really helpful. So if you can't canvass, come out and have fun because you can drive folks around. That's cool too.
That is really fun. Makes them more friends.
So the last thing before I turn it over to you, Carrie, so that you can talk to Antonia, is that we want to remind everybody that there is a new Zoom link to register for. So I am sure that is in the chat. We'd love for you to do that. It will make Robbin's life so much easier. It'll make your life easy because we don't want you to have any trouble getting into the Friday Power Lunch, right? Yeah. Right. So I am going to turn it over to you so that you can bring up and introduce Antonia, because we love reframing and how she tells us how to do that. So goodbye from me and hello to Antonia.
We'll see you right after. We're going to bring up Antonia Scatton. For those of you, I know you've seen her possibly on the Friday Power Lunch before. She's been a guest. She is the author of Reframing America on a Substack. I've met her at the Women's Summit. She's been a part of Network Nova and the Friday Power Lunch community for a long time. She's a political communications expert, and her mission is to help master strategic framing and messaging skills. And she trains activists, and of course her newsletter is amazing on Substack. So she's going to help us understand how to present some of these key issues. So welcome, Antonia. Welcome back to the Friday Power Lunch.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. Great to see you all.
Great. So,
thank you so much.
So we were talking the other day, and it's so funny. We're talking about canvassing. You actually hate canvassing. So tell us about your background, where you started when you kind of weren't as big of a fan of the canvassing.
Well, you know what? It's not that I hate canvassing. It's just that I'm terrible at it. Like I'm one of those people, like there are people in the world who just emotionally can't do it. And so I'm kind of one of those people, which is funny because I've been working on campaigns since 1992, but I started out doing advance work. So I started doing event planning and communications. I've done just about everything else. I've run canvassing programs. I've trained for canvassing, but I'm just like, and people say, oh, if you just warm up to it, it'd be fine. And then they see me do it and they're like, no, do something else. So I'm kind of like, don't do what I do what I say. But I have studied this for a long time. And I think like the part that I play, like what Elizabeth had to say was just wonderful. She's absolutely right. I totally agree with everything she's saying. I'm just like, I think today I'm dealing with a very specific part of it, which is that when how do you get to that part where they're talking, or how do you get to that part where you've made a connection and then you get that conversation going? Because sometimes it's just hard. I've had a lot of people talking to me be like, they say some crazy thing that sounds like they got it from Fox News, and then what do I do?
Yeah.
And
You
so
were
that's
talking
really what I'm
about
focused on.
Right. And when we talked earlier in preparation for today, you kind of broke things down. You sort of had kind of tips and then talking points. So I kind of think about it, with the tips, like finding the opening. You mentioned that the other day.
Yeah.
Just try to find that opening.
So, I mean, the way I put it is that, one of the lessons of framing is that you don't argue the point that they're putting out there, because that is looking at the situation from their perspective, and your job is to get them to see it from your perspective. So rather than, debate, throw in a bunch of facts, or, they're always going to defend their position. So sometimes you just want to play dumb. You just want to be, and say, well, what about these immigrants? And you're just be like, oh, well, I didn't hear anything about that. Yeah.
Right. It's easy for them to, when I hear what you're saying. So what you're saying is that when we allow them to start putting all of these, Fox News talking points out there, that basically we're ceding control of the conversation. And even when Elizabeth was talking about the 80-20 rule, you're still guiding, you're listening, but you're still kind of guiding them.
So the goal is to, instead of, it's not like you're telling them what issue to talk about. You can talk about any issue. But somebody made a comment about an empathetic bridge. I think that's really like a great term for what we're talking about here, which is that you want to find the thing that gets them to look at a situation not from fear or hate, because a lot of the conservative positions are like the fear way of looking at it, or the hate way of looking at it, a defensive way of looking at it. Somebody's after you, or somebody wants to take something from you. And we're about empathy. And so it's like, our job is to sort of say, well, here's the empathy way to look at it, and then get them to talk. So like when they're saying, we shouldn't be teaching CRT in schools, instead of saying, well, we don't teach CRT, or it's a graduate school, we just say, well, all I know is no kid in school should ever be taught that there's something wrong with them because of who they are. And they might turn around and say, that's exactly how I feel. I worry about CRT because I have a kid who's white, and I feel like they're telling him there's something wrong with him because of who they are. And then you're having a conversation. And then you're having a conversation based on common ground and empathy for children. And and then you're off to the races.
And then you talk about values, right? You talk about values.
Right. So you're coming at it from a place of values, of what we care about. And hopefully they will engage on that. And then you're getting them to see the situation from that perspective. And then you can have a whole conversation. And I advise people, like, pivot to that, don't argue with them, pivot to the values, and then let them talk. And that's, what Elizabeth said. Then, if you can get them engaged, then let them do the talking. And hopefully you will have gotten them to look at the situation from that empathy-based perspective.
So one of the other things that you talk about a lot, when you're trying to reframe, you mentioned it briefly, that trying to keep it positive and reframing, and that can be hard with some of these issues. Can you give us an example?
Well, I think positive. So there's there's ways to, like, there's a difference between defensive and proactive, and positive and negative. So, like, first of all, you don't want to be defensive. Like, you don't want them accusing and you trying to defend your position. And so when I tell people to be positive, it's like you can't, your job, imagine that somewhere in everybody's brain is a blue neural network that is full of democratic ideas and democratic thoughts and democratic ways of looking at things. And your job is to wake that up with your words. is to switch that part of their brain on and let the red part of their brain switch off. So if you're saying what's wrong with them, you're switching on the red part of their brain because you're talking about them. Like if you're talking about what's wrong with Trump or what's wrong with Vance or what's wrong with what they're doing, you're always switching on the red part of their brain. And, really what you need to do is switch on that blue part of their brain. And the only way to do that is with words. It's like, imagine those words are like a light switch. And so you have to trigger those democratic values. You have to talk about democratic perspectives. That's the only way to do it. And even if it seems like, oh, we have to refute what they're saying, that doesn't do what we need to do. And it's weird because it's really counterintuitive, but it's like, forget talking about them. Just talk about us.
Yes. And pull them into that space. It sounds like you're just pulling them into our space and getting them out of that space. Right. I love that. So, okay. So switching gears a little bit, because you were mentioning some talking points, and this is what I love about your Substack. When I read your articles, I'm like, I feel ready, right? I'm ready for the elevator moment, right? I'm ready. But I don't know, I speak a foreign language, and you study the verbs, right? You study them all, right? And you think you've got them all. And then you go to have a conversation with someone and the tenses are changing real quick. And you're talking about males and females in the same sentence. And you got to use this one and then you got to use that one. Yeah. And suddenly all of my little verb charts just go right out the window. And so I feel that way sometimes when I read your article or I listen to an awesome podcast. I got them all lined up. I'm ready to go. And then they start talking. I'm like, I lose it. So give us, you said preparing your talking points in advance is one of your tips. So can you give us some examples of some of your talking points that you recommend?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and I realized that I had a process that I came up with these, and basically like I went to my place of empathy and I said, what is the most empathetic way to look at this? And how does this reflect democratic ways of looking at the world? I spend a lot of time thinking about democratic ways of looking at the world. So I have a handy toolkit. But for anybody, you can just go to the empathy and work your way from there. And so you can literally come up with your own talking points by just sitting quietly with yourself. Quiet. Go to empathy and say, okay, immigration. If I really, 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 not thinking about like economic this or that, but say, what is the most caring possible way to look at this? And it's like, you look at those people and it's like, they're the same as us. They are just like our ancestors. They're just the latest batch of us. In fact, the fact that they got up out of where they were and took the initiative to come here, that's kind of what makes them American. I mean, think about it. That's the one thing we all have in common, or most of us, but that every immigrant in America, somebody in their family at one point got up from where they were and took the initiative to come here. And that's, so that's the kind of, putting yourself in their shoes and feeling for them way to look at the situation. And once you start talking about that, then you're off to the races about like, well, my family came here 300 years ago. Then you're in a conversation. So you can find for yourself, but it takes like quiet and contemplation. But if you give yourself a little piece of time to work out kind of like, what is my caring view on this topic, you can come up with your own talking points for a lot of stuff. But I can give you some of my points on a few things. So like with the immigrants, I said like, immigrants have always been essential to our culture. I mean, Americans come from everywhere. That's what makes us great.
Some of them voluntarily, some of them not voluntarily.
Not voluntarily. Right. Well, I mean, I didn't include them in immigrants. People did not. That's not immigration. That's slavery. Right. Or conquest if you're talking about natives. But the numerical majority of American immigrants are descended of immigrants. And so, if you talk, like I said, people who took the initiative to come here and find a better life, that's a way to kind of bond with people who are, because what you're trying to do is rehumanize a group of people that have been dehumanized, and that is true of in every case of dehumanization.
Right. So what I hear you saying then is basically, if we're coming from a place of empathy, we're thinking about issues that are important to us, and we communicate them in a way that relates to us, we're going to remember them, right? Because we came up with them maybe, and that they'll be more heartfelt when we're talking and listening to voters. Yeah. I thought something in terms of the democratic way of thinking that you said that really made me stop and think is that you had said that Republicans are often talking about freedom. Democrats are often talking about equality and fairness. So I'm wondering, you said economic fairness. And you had another zinger that I'm holding back on because I want you to talk about this one first. But that how, if you're talking to someone who does not have the democratic way of thinking, would we be better off arguing the fairness aspect of that, presenting that idea to them, or would we be better off trying to meet them on the freedom side?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we have taken freedom back. Like when I talked to you, I think I was talking about the fact that they view freedom in a very limited sense, that their perception of freedom has to do, like they actually say the only two human rights worth protecting are property rights and free speech. And what they mean by free speech is the freedom to say whatever you want, even if it hurts other people. And when they say property rights, it's the right to earn whatever you want, regardless of how that hurts other people. So what they're talking about is the freedom to do unto others. It is the freedom to be excused from their responsibility toward other people in society, which I call license. I don't call that freedom. We believe in freedom. And one of those forms of freedom is economic fairness, is the idea that in order for you to be the author of your own economic life, to be in the driver's seat of your own economic life, there has to be a fair process out there. And so, we have been told our entire lives that if you work hard, that you can get ahead and get a job, you can support your family. And I think like when people talk about Make America Great Again, they're talking about that time when you could support a family on a single income. And they're not wrong about that. It's just that Trump's not going to actually do anything about that.
Right. So that kind of, does, sorry, but just to kind of starting to wrap up here, that was sort of the zinger that you threw at me, and that I really, really wanted to spend the last couple of minutes talking about. Okay. As far as talking points with that is that the American dream is a promise. And I wanted you to say a little bit more about that.
It's a promise. So my latest post called it the American Deal, which is like, and I've been thinking about this issue for a long time and trying to come up with the right language. And in the tradition of framing, I don't know, I mean, if a lot of people are fans of George Lakoff, I was trained by the great George Lakoff. I studied in cognitive linguistics, and there's something called moral accounting, which is that in our brains, when we think of what's fair is like, if you owe somebody, like I owe somebody a favor, like there's this huge part of the inside of our brain that is hardwired for fairness. And so, when you look at it and say, if you just say, well, I'm not earning enough money, is that fairness? Is that greed? Is that, that's an ambiguous way to talk about it. But if you say, look, I was made a promise, we had a deal, like I work, you pay me, I work hard, you pay me enough to support my family on, it's like a handshake deal for our entire American culture. And what has happened over the last 40 years, basically the Reagan, et cetera, is that they're not business world not holding up their end of the deal. And then it becomes a fairness issue. So if you talk about, what I'm saying now is that the American dream, it was never really a dream. Dreams are ephemeral. They're out of reach. It was always a deal. So the American deal was that you work hard, you will be able to get a job that you can support your family on. And so that creates a moral imperative that corporations hold up their side of that deal. And I actually did focus groups this spring where I brought this up, and everybody liked that. Like, there was no group that did not say, yes, that's what we want. People are tired of it's not that they don't appreciate the social safety net, but they're tired of having to depend on it. They don't they're like, I have a good job. Why can I still not buy a house? This isn't me falling on hard times. I shouldn't need the safety net unless I fall. This is normal. Like, I have a job where I'm earning more than I ever thought I would, and I still can't support my family. Something is broken.
Yes.
And so
you said that they often think about systems rather than candidates, that if we can agree that the system is broken, that can become one of those shared value statements that you mentioned before. Well, that is awesome.
And everybody brings that, like JD Vance brings that up, Bernie Sanders brings that, like there is a very common understanding that that system is broken. But what people in my focus groups are like, they wanted leaders to do something about it. They wanted government to come in and make them hold up their end of the deal. Yeah. And that's the strength that they're looking for. But, so we didn't really talk about a lot of the talk. Do we have time to talk about more of that?
Yeah, no, we need to wrap up. But I was really hoping to close with your democracy is a deal, because that was probably, among all the things that you said, it was very inspirational to me and helped me kind of think about that values proposition. But we are going to have a robust after chat, so hope you'll stick around for that. And we always love to have Antonia Scatton with us again from her Substack is Reframing America. We're all big fans, and we thank you so much for helping us think about things in a different way.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And I've put the link in the chat to a post that has a lot of those specific talking points. Because I know a lot of people are like, don't tell me just tell me what to say. So here's a lot of what to say. All right, thank you so much.
Awesome.
I think that's fantastic. This is going to be the best after chat ever, I think. But I want to just bring up a few other things, Carrie, before we talk about what we learned today. I want to let everybody know that we have a new Patreon, Jennifer Rolander. So we're very excited about that. And you should know that we've raised $2,600 so far for our billboards. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. This is fantastic. You're going to be so proud.
This is our little billboard-a-thon. It's a billboard-a-thon.
It's a billboard-a-thon. Lindley, what do you want to tell us?
Let's get two. Let's get more.
Well, I think we're at least at 2,800 now. The last time I checked, my internet is not great today. But thank you all so very much. We've had an absolute blast. If you read the short article that's been linked in the chat a few times, I have had Democratic committee chairs just like burst into tears in my arms when they received their big signs, because people are just so proud to be a Democrat. And, Danica Rome is somebody that we work very closely with, and we really appreciate that she encouraged us to go ahead and use our good neighbor messaging and talk about feeding kids and fixing roads, just to put front and center who we are as Democrats, who we care about, and what it is we do when we have power, and make that really clear for people. Also, a fun update. There was a CNN story very recently about the Menominee County Democrats in Michigan. This is a rural county in Michigan, and they were making beautiful homemade signs on their own because they couldn't get enough signs in their hands. We contacted them a few weeks ago. They've been in contact with us. So later today, I'm personally going back to the UPS store where the entire staff supports the Harris Walls ticket, and they have been helping me ship these signs to Ontario County in upstate New York, to Bucks County in Pennsylvania. So today I'm going back, and we will be sending some up to our new friends in Menominee County, Michigan. And we really, really appreciate all of your support. This is incredibly helpful, and it's just so great to see folks excited to be a Democrat. And not to call out Northampton County, where our very dear friend Finale lives, but I heard from someone there, hey, we can probably only use about 12 of these signs. We won't be able to find places for them. That exact same group of folks reached out to me a few days ago and said, can we get some more? So that has been a really fun thing to see, this groundswell of enthusiasm and just honestly to be proud to be Democrats in these places. We are about fixing roads and feeding kids. And I'm originally from North Carolina. We're seeing a lot of heartbreak right now in Southwest Virginia and in my home state. And it means something to be about the policy impacts. And that is what Democrats do. We are there on the ground. The resources are there. President Biden, everyone is responding. And that really, I think, puts front and center who we are in an emergency, but who we are all the time. So thank you all so much for
Great job, Lindley. So amazing. That's amazing work.
It really is. And I want to say, we can't thank Road Ground Game enough. It's Northampton and Accomack County together. They're just fantastic people here. And what I would say is, and I'll say this to everybody, Lindley, thank you for North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. The Biden-Harris team is out there, and they are talking to the governors, they're talking to the mayors. So despite what people are hearing, this is our time to amplify the messages of the Democratic Party, because we support everyone. We don't care what state you're in. It is all Americans, and that is not what everybody sees. So, and I also just wanted to point out for signs, it is our cue. It is our cues to tell people who we are. And you'll be so surprised at the people who will be happy and who will want to sign and who will feel like they have permission to do something different, because this is the time to do something different.
And
so
they can really start the conversation for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, these are fantastic signs. I look at these things, man, these are gorgeous. And there's even a really cool Social Security one, because we know what our communities want. So $2,800. We're going to see what else we get. Thank you, Jennifer, again. Carrie, what did you learn today?
Holy cow. I learned so much. Of course, I've been thinking about how Liz Cheney is reframing conversations with her friends right now. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Like, I was thinking about some of the things that Antonia had said with the values. And if you listen to what Liz Cheney said yesterday when she was with Kamala Harris, she was focusing on values, because it is bringing us back to the core values we can all agree on. I thought that is a great message. I also think the idea that, whether someone agrees with you or not, and Antonia said this too, she's, when we spoke earlier, that you either planted the seed or you started a conversation. If they don't want to talk to you, you planted a seed. It's like you and your little nuggets, right? You planted the seed. If they want to talk to you, then you started the conversation. And thanks to Elizabeth, we've got some other ways of thinking about those conversations. I love the 80-20 rule. I'm going to be using that with my husband. And I also love this idea of non-judgmental curiosity, because we have often, Democrats and myself, I've been guilty of assuming that if they aren't on my side, they just don't get it. And that is a judgmental place. And I need to remember my humility when I'm on the doors.
Yeah, I think that's the key word, is humility. We had the same thing. It was the 80-20. It is the solutions, about being creative. It is just like, when we get ready to go canvassing on Saturday, it is to take a deep breath and a big dose of humility and empathy. And I think that we're going to be okay. And so this has been a fantastic show. The after chat is going to be fantastic. I want to thank Elizabeth Chur. I want to thank Antonia. We're going to get to see them. You guys know what we always say, it's up to us. This show, you can get the audio version on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so you can listen to us. And also next week, it's going to be a great show. It's going to be the winning stretch in Virginia. We're going to have congressional candidate Eugene Vidman and Brandon Thurmer, and he's the vice chair of the statewide affairs, and I think the Virginia Victory Coordinating Campaign. So guys, become a Patreon. Thank you so much for joining the show today. We'll see you on the other side in the after chat.